unceded territory of the Dena'ina people in Anchorage, Alaska, the original stewards of the land, and I am the Alaska State Director for the Wilderness Society. I'll pass the mic now to my co-presenter and colleague, Danielle.
Good evening or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Stickman. I am the network coordinator for the Western Alaska Partnership, which was formerly the Western Alaska Landscape Conservation Cooperative. I'm Dena'ina and Koyukon Athabascan, raised in Bristol Bay, which is Southwest Alaska. And I've worked around the state, and I really am looking forward to chatting with you all this evening. So chin on, thank you. And I think we're gonna go straight into a stretch. So it's strange because I can't see anybody except for Karlin. So Karlin and I are gonna be the only ones doing it. So I know some of you guys have been in other sessions, so I would like you guys to sit up tall. Imagine that a string is pulling you up to the sky. Take a deep inhale through your nose and exhale it out with your mouth. One more time, inhale through your nose. Exhale it out your mouth. And last time, inhale through your nose. Exhale out your mouth. And I'm going to trust that you guys are all doing this with me because all I can see is Karlin. So interlace your fingers and then put them over your head and stretching, and then lean a little to the right. Inhale back to center and exhale to the left. And back to center. Bring your hands out in front of you and kind of push the palms of your hands away. Your fingertips, stretch them out. And then bring them back in front of you and create a wave. Like you're out on the ocean, doing a wave. And then bigger, include your shoulders. And then reverse the wave. So we're always better in the waves in one direction. And then begin to slow the waves down, slower waves. And stopping the waves and kind of make a Z or a weird box on both sides. Stretching out the fingers and the wrists. And other side. All right, and then flick the water off your hands. And then, so I like to do this, it would be great to do this in person, but imagine that you're a salmon at the mouth of a river, just leaving the ocean, about to go all the way up to your spawning grounds, and you're at the mouth of the river. And you're gonna swerve left from a bear, and then you're swerving right from a fisherman, and then you're gonna go up the waterfall and down the waterfall. And then you're almost there, you're almost all the way to the end. And in 3, 2, 1, you're gonna clap. 3, 2, 1, clap. And cover your eyes, take off your glasses if you have them on. Inhale through your nose. Exhale out your mouth. And feel that energy go all the way down your body. Slowly release your hands down. And we'll do one more. So bring your shoulders up to your ears, glasses if you have them on, and then inhale. Bring your shoulder blades back down together. One more time. Exhale out your mouth, blades to the ears, back down. All right. I think we're gonna also, for those of you guys who are, whatever platform you're on, if you would like to ask us any questions, there's some moderators that are keeping track of the questions that are coming through. So please feel free during the presentation to ask any questions. And I think it's your turn, Karlin.
All right, great. Thank you for centering us, Danielle, and thank you all for being here with us on Facebook and YouTube and Zoom. We know it's late where you are, so we appreciate your indulgence and you being here, staying up with us for this session on seeking refuge in the Arctic Refuge. And we're here to tell you a little bit about a trip that we recently took in June and the beginning of July, where Danielle and I and 5 other folks went into the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And if you're not sure where that is, please look it up and find it on a map. It's in the northeastern side portion of Alaska. Alaska is over 300 million acres, and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is one of the crown jewels of the National Wildlife Refuge system, and it has been protected for 60 years since this year. It was officially protected 60 years ago, first as a range and then as the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But what we'd like to share with you about the refuge today is that this place has been very important to the Indigenous people of Alaska, the Inupiat people that live up in the northern part, north of the Brooks Range and all around the Brooks Range, and also important to the Gwich'in, who live in the interior and south of the Brooks Range. But also this is a unique place because it has Indigenous people that live in and around the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and they have been living there since time immemorial. It's a very sacred place. It's a special place. It has very strong, important ecological and environmental properties, but it's also a sacred place to the Indigenous people. The porcupine caribou herd have their birthing grounds in the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge, and it's just it's an amazing place. So we're going to be talking to you about a trip that we wanted to take into the refuge. There's a lot of guides that take people to the refuge from all over the country, but there's only one Inupiat elder named Robert Thompson who takes people into the refuge, and he actually lives in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Kaktovik. So it was important for us to gather some of our Indigenous partners and conservation partners and go with Robert Thompson for a 10-day trip on the Hulahula River. We started in Coldfoot, Alaska, and actually we started in Anchorage and drove over 600 miles, got to Fairbanks, camped out, and then went to Coldfoot. And then we flew on a small plane into a place called Grasser's Airfield. And we met one of our colleagues, the executive director, Natalie Dawson from the Audubon Society. And it was really an amazing trip. We also had David Krause, our assistant state director for the Wilderness Society. And we had Lily Patton, who is a recent graduate from Puget Sound University with a degree in biology and environmental studies. And we also had our guide, Robert Thompson from Kaktovik, who's 73 years young and still doing this, getting out in the wild places, remote places, and his assistant guide, Carl Straley. So the 7 of us embarked on this 10-day trip, and there was many times when it was almost going to be canceled because of all the things that we're going through now, the COVID-19 pandemic, the racial tensions that are happening across the country, the politics, the conditions of the times. As you know, the current administration snuck in a provision in the 2017 Tax Act opening up the Arctic Refuge to oil and gas exploration. And so now more than ever, it's important that we protect this pristine environment and this sacred land. And so we wanted to look at creating new protections and possibly new land designations through an Indigenous lens. And by taking out Indigenous leaders and conservation leaders onto the land, we were holding place-based discussions within the refuge. And this is only the first of many. We hope to go back in soon and have many place-based dialogues. But to see the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge through Robert Thompson's eyes and lens, he knew all the place names and where the Inupiat people hunt the Dall sheep or the Gwich'in folks hunt. And the Indigenous people in Alaska still live off of the land, primarily relying on subsistence activities, hunting and gathering. And we have a very special relationship with the land and with the animals. And we look at the land, not that we own the land or that it's something that belongs to us, but we belong to the land, and it's a symbiotic relationship. We have to take care of each other, and the animals take care of us. And the Gwich'in have a story where the Gwich'in became caribou, and they made a pact with the caribou that they would take care of them, and the caribou would take care of the Gwich'in people. And the Inupiat people have similar stories, where the polar bear became man, and there's that same relationship. And you'll hear that with all the indigenous groups all across Alaska. And we're going to take this short time to introduce you to the refuge, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Danielle to share some of her experiences in the refuge.
Shannon, thank you, Karlin. So thank you again for everyone deciding to attend this session, and Karlin did a great job of summarizing the trip. So the reason that I decided that I really wanted to go on this trip was for several reasons. Number one was to do the land-based knowledge exchange with a few other conservation leaders at Audubon and the Wilderness Society. And I'm actually at the Alaska Conservation Foundation. And so these place-based dialogues really get us in a different space that you can't get to when you're inside of a building. So it was a chance to practice a place name dialogue. What would that look like? What kind of leaders would we take out there to have real discussions about what to do in places like the Arctic Refuge, and how can we work together? So that it was to expand those land-based knowledge exchanges, and also to expand dialogues that I've done before with if you've guessed it from the hand motions and doing the salmon, and me coming from Bristol Bay, I love salmon. But and so I've done dialogues with people from different backgrounds in the salmon world. So from policymakers to subsistence users to personal fishermen to commercial fishermen, and got them together to connect on really how can we work to continue a salmon-based lifestyle for the future to come. And it was really, really great. And so one of the key reasons why I wanted to go to the refuge was to see how the Inupiat people and the Gwich'in people connect with the caribou. And there are many differences in different players who are involved in the Arctic Refuge. So it'd be great to get them together and really see what connects us to that place. So, and also another reason why I went on this trip was it's part of my job is to build partnerships and to expand the understanding between federal and state and Indigenous and then nonprofit sectors. And it was a chance to go to the Arctic Refuge. It's a beautiful place. I've only seen pictures. So those are the key reasons. And also because Karlin is an amazing leader around the state and is a future thinker. And so it was really great to get our group together and think about solutions. And so during that time, it was kind of late June. There was a lot going on in our country, from the marches going around the US, and everything felt unrest. And I also want to acknowledge the changes that are going on in the West Coast right now. And we just lost someone really great who was so valuable to our country yesterday. And so there was a lot of unrest, like there is now, when we were going out to the Arctic Refuge. And so all 7 of us, except for Natalie, who was out there for 2 weeks prior, 6 of us went out there with all these different things going on in our minds and what's going on in our country. And so I can imagine a lot of us are also thinking about the climate change. And so when we finally got out there, everything was kind of quiet. It was quiet. And the solutions, or everything that we were consumed with before we got out onto the land, kind of faded, and we were able to see things more clearly. And so when we were out on the banks of the Hulahula River, we did these brainstorming activities, and we came up with different solutions that we would have not been able to come up with if we had done it in the city, in a building. So it was just a great experience to be out there and to talk about real things that are going on in our country, and think of new ideas on how to approach those. And personally, at the time, I had 7 stitches in my hand right here. Uh, and I had clumsily fallen on a coffee cup, and I had to take the stitches out on the banks of the river, and it was unlike any other experience that I've had in my life. But it also forced me to slow down and connect with people and ask them for help in certain ways that I wouldn't have done normally if I was just able-bodied. And so it also made me think of how we as a country are slowly we've come together, and we can even come together more as a community, and think more as a community, and how can we help each other. So it was great. It was a great lesson for me to really think about the community in Alaska, and then the communities within our country. And Karlin mentioned our indigenous values of valuing the land, water, and plants and animals all equally. And we had some discussion of how we view the land in traditional conservation language, and also in state and federal languages. It's a very for lack of better words, it's a masculine way of seeing things, and how we name places is also is very different. And so we talked about indigenous values and indigenous place names, of how we name things wasn't just after a person, it was how we connected with that place, or how an event happened in the past. So we began to think about all the trails that we walked on, that were carved through the earth, but by all the caribou for hundreds of years. And so we followed those trails, and you could feel the caribou. And we followed sheep trails, and really thinking about how can we do small changes, and think about how the land was named prior to discovery. And so we had discussions of that, and also what energy do we bring to a place when we're thinking of wanting to protect a place or get the story out. Like what kind of energy are we bringing in, and how do we relate to the place? And also about the traditional methods of how do you prepare to go to such a place that it has no access to human resources. So we were really visitors out there. We had to bring everything with us, and we had to bring our food. And as I was looking at our Western gear and everything that's kind of made out of plastic and synthetics, I thought of our ancestors and how they prepared to go on the land. And they had to think for themselves. So they had to think about all the things that they had to bring out there in case something happened. They had to think about food and how to really prepare. And so there were so many things to think about when we were out there. But I think I think I might be having to go into a exercise. Karlin, what do you think? Should we? Okay. I don't know how long I've been talking, but there's so many things that happened in the refuge that from looking at it in an Indigenous lens, and also from the conservation lens, to in the holistic lens of how everything is connected. So when we saw wolves, we saw wolves chasing the caribou, and then the caribou came around, and we were surrounded by 800 caribou. And I'd never been in such a strange place where I was just a visitor before, and so uniquely just grateful for that experience. So again, I would like everybody to sit up tall. Take a deep inhale through your nose. Exhale out your mouth. Close your eyes. And think about the happiest time in your life? What were you doing? And who were you with? And think about the place. Inhale through your nose. Exhale out your mouth. And as you're thinking of this joyous time in your life, think about how it felt. And where did you feel that joy? And then again, if you've got your glasses on, take them off and begin to move your hands back and forth, creating some friction, warming them up. And this time we won't clap, but in 3, 2, 1, we'll cover our eyes. So 3, 2, 1, cover your eyes. Take a deep inhale in. Exhale it out. And slowly bring your hands down. And that joyous feeling, that serene, content feeling that's how it felt all the time on the Arctic Refuge. And sometimes maybe the feeling of not having a indoor toilet or a place to go to for shelter may not be your place of refuge, but it certainly gives you a different perspective of life, and it makes you realize like we only have a few places that are as sacred as this place, and that joy, that thought that you were thinking of, imagine just being out on the land, and that's how it was every minute. And so I'll pass it over to Karlin.
Thank you, Danielle. It's so hard for us to share with you in the short amount of time what it was like to be in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, to convey either in film or by words or through video. It's just so hard to share what it's like to be out in Mother Nature in the middle of a very remote area where you still are one, not only with the land, but with the animals and the weather, the climate. And we're mindful that many of you who are tuning in now from the Pacific Northwest and from the Seattle area, you're experiencing a lot of changes. It's hard to breathe. You can't go outside as much because of the pandemic, but also because of the wildfires and the smoke. And so we're mindful of the fact that this is the reality that we're living in and what you're experiencing right now. And so we're with you in solidarity. But we want to convey within the short amount of time and to encourage you to get outside when you can, when it's safe to get outside, and to experience nature and to be one with nature, to disconnect from your cell phones and your iPhones and your iTunes and your Apple TV and all that stuff. Disconnect and go out and get connected with the land, because when you connect with the land, you connect with yourself and with the animals. And when we connect with ourselves, we realize that we're connected to the land, and anything bad that we do to the land, we're doing to ourselves. And conversely, anything we do to ourselves, if we don't take care of our health and our emotional health, our mental health, our physical health, that impacts the land as well. And Danielle talked about the importance of the energy and the energy that we bring to the land and that we get from the land and from nature. And the first few days out in the refuge, we were just decompressing. It's kind of like when I'm watching a movie with my 8-year-old daughter, Cedar Rose, and the movie stops and you see it, the wheels spinning on the Apple TV or whatever, and it's buffering and we all get frustrated. It's like, what it hurt? Come on, what are you doing? We're missing the best part. And that's kind of what it's like going out into nature. Is you're buffering, you're hitting the pause button, you're taking a deep breath, and you're reconnecting with the land and the animals, and having the rain and the snow and the wind in your mouth and the mosquitoes flying up your nose and all dirt under your fingernails and near-death experiences or whatnot. It's rejuvenating. It requires you to look deep into yourself and to rely on your inner strength. Can I make it up to the top of that peak? can I make it down, 30 miles or 80 miles of this river? And then you learn to rely on your teammates and the people that you're with. And the video that you're watching behind me is some of the shots that I took while we are in the refuge. You're seeing 4 black wolves here. Danielle talked about the wolves that were chasing the caribou. They stopped to look at us. And then earlier you saw footage of caribou in the refuge. And so we just appreciate you giving us this opportunity to share a piece of the Arctic with you and to encourage you to get outside and to explore nature. And if you worry that you don't know enough to be outside, or you can't afford a National Outdoor Leadership School month-long training, or can't be away for that long, learn one skill at a time. Learn how to swim, learn how to make a fire without matches, so that you can survive when all of your matches get wet and your lighter is gone. Learn how to make a shelter out of the Mother Earth. If you lose your rafts and all of your gear is downriver, so that you'll know how to survive. But just go outside and sit and reflect. When I was going to school in Spokane, I used to drive on I-90 and go to Seattle and just look at Snoqualmie Pass and go on the ferry to Bainbridge Island so I could take a deep breath. And if I was really stressed out, I'd go up on Route 20 and go through the Northern Cascades and just feel small again, to feel empowered and big again. So we encourage you to get out in nature, and I'm going to pause now so that we can answer some questions. We'll access the chat here, and thank you, Adit and Elena and team, for taking any questions. Danielle, do you see one up there?
Yeah, I do. One more thing that I would like to add, though, before we go to the questions. Sorry, Karlin. Just one more thing that I would like to add is
get grounded. You don't have to be in a big refuge to find refuge in nature. Danielle, do you want to add to that?
Sorry. So I think if you can't get to a place, yeah, do everything that Karlin suggested, but also um, I like be curious. Be curious in whatever space you're in. Like even if I have little cute succulents on my table over here. Think of maybe like what it would be like to be a succulent or a plant and or a tree outside, and think about how interwoven that plant is with the rest of the world, with the earth, and how it's dependent on the sun and the rain and the ground, and think of how we as humans are also connected to that plant or even that animal if you have a pet. And it gets you out of the frame of mind that we're in right now. It's a lot of information constantly streaming in, and when we look at things in a different lens or even imagine that we are the plants and the animals, it makes us view life and everything differently. So I'll just go on to the next question. What is one positive experience that you'll always take with you? I guess I'll go first, Karlin. So one positive experience that I'll always take with me is the oh no, they can't hear anything. Um, just a moment. It seems like people cannot hear us. Can people hear us okay? Emma, Alina. Okay, I think we're good. Okay. Okay. So the question
Seems
one
like
positive thing
people cannot hear us.
experience that we'll always take with us. The main thing is like how fragile our lives are and how to never take anything for granted. And I think always going with whatever may arise. I've never really had stitches before, and I also don't like asking for help with things. So it also made me value community and our people more, because we it does take a village and a community to be able to survive, and those are indigenous values. And so it really just it reminded me of our humanness, and also how every minute and every day is we'll never know what is going to happen, so we have to remember to appreciate every experience, whether good or bad or up or down. It's always teaching us something. And so I'll pass it over to Karlin.
Thank you, Danielle. And for me, it was knowing that my grandparents, Wilbur and Cora Itchoak, lived not too far from the refuge on the other side of the Brooks Range. And it wasn't thousands of years ago that the Inupiat people were living off the land and living in sod huts within the land, but it's within our generations. And so I took that away as a very special takeaway, that I felt like I was connecting with my family that used to live in the area, and seeing the terrain as they would have with the grizzly bears, with the bears and the wolves and the caribou. It was just amazing. And we want to be mindful of your time. We know many of you are hanging up soon, but we want to thank you for joining us, and we'll answer. And we want to be mindful of your time. We know many of you are hanging up soon, but we want to thank you for examples of Indigenous-led conservation that would be a model for the Arctic Refuge. And that's something that we're working on, coming up with a lot of very thoughtful and smart conservation partners and Indigenous leaders. There's a lot of models in Australia, Brazil, Canada, rural Russia, where they've created Indigenous protected and conserved areas, and the Indigenous people work in a conservation economy to help protect the local wildlife and land. But we're looking at all different kind of case models, and we're finding them all over the world. And so there's a lot of different models out there. Danielle?
Okay, I'm just checking. I'm doing a time check really quick. Yeah, I think one example that comes up for me is in New Zealand, they were able to get a river as I think it was protected and with rights. And so I think that's one example of what could be possible. And maybe a model we can go off of. And I think we have some time, Karlin, to answer the last two questions. There's one question: what's one thing you want people to know about the Arctic Refuge that they may not know? And I think one thing is there's one thing. How can we find one thing that people may not know? Do you have one? You can go first, Karlin.
Oh, okay. I think one thing that I learned when I was up there with Natalie Dawson from Audubon is that over 200 known bird species come to the Arctic Refuge each year, and all but 25 of those bird species migrate to warmer regions. And that means that birds from all 50 states are traveling to the Arctic Refuge to have their babies and to eat. And it's such an important place in the migration route for birds, and any negative cumulative environmental impact to the birds in the refuge will have a negative impact to the birds that you see in Seattle, in Tacoma, or anywhere in the lower 48. And also the almost 200,000 caribou that migrate there and have their birth, give their birth to the caribou in the coastal plain. There are no more wild caribou roaming in the lower 48. Alaska is the last place where you find caribou roaming in these large numbers. So it's vital that we protect these areas, and we encourage you to go to the chat and to look at the links there where you can go to our website at the Wilderness Society and others and take action to help protect this sacred calving ground. Danielle?
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful answer. I still can't think of I guess one thing that I personally didn't know was it's a simple thing, and it also may not be. Yeah, so one thing that I didn't know when I got up there was about pingos. So pingos are there's these like indentions of where permafrost has kind of caved into is that correct, Karlin? They've kind of come back into the earth, and then they also made like a mound. So all around the Arctic Refuge, there were these pingos, and then also the shifts in the permafrost and the ground was so much more it was very present everywhere we went. And so most of Alaska is a swamp or a marshland, but there was so much presence of permafrost melting and the shifts in the ground, which was honestly, it was scary to see how much the earth is shifting, and also fascinating. But yes, again, there's many websites that are shared in the chat where you can go and learn more and create some action or take an action. But one thing I encourage you to do is wherever you are, whatever landscapes you have in your area, research what the local landscapes were traditionally named in the Indigenous language, because with that change in looking at landscapes, we can relearn and unlearn how things were viewed in the past and how we connected to it. I think so, Karlin, I think we still have we have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything Are there any more questions in the chat? Or is there anything else that you would like to share, Karlin?
No, I think that we just want to thank you all again for taking the time to join us. And we want to encourage you to learn more about the wilderness areas around you, the national forest, the refuge areas around you. And for me, it's kind of like when you take a CPR class and you learn to look, listen, and feel. And that's kind of what we have to remind ourselves to do when we're out in nature, in Mother Nature, is to just take a deep breath, to look, listen, and feel, and get grounded. Slow down. Don't worry about the time. Don't worry about the weather. Don't worry about the distance. Everyone, when we go out in the wild, a lot of people always ask, how far do we have to go? Where are we going? What time is it? Come on, when do we have to go? What's the weather going to be like? And get to a place where you're so comfortable in nature that you forget all of that and you disconnect with time, with weather, with distance. And when you do that, you're going to feel this euphoria, this ecstasy where you feel enlightened and one with nature. And it's so powerful. And then when you come back to the city, you'll actually be tired immediately of seeing paint and plastic and metal and cement and cars and the noise that's all overwhelming. But I encourage you to get outside, to bring your friends and family, to experience it together, and to take a deep breath and to look, listen, and feel. And then bring your friends and keep going. And pretty soon you'll be traveling hundreds of miles into remote areas and surviving on your own and experiencing things you'll be writing about for the rest of your life. Danielle?
I think that's really good. So one of the key things that about this trip and so in my role as I coordinate federal, state, and Indigenous leaders along with nonprofit leaders to come together in a big area of representing a big area of the Alaska to come together to make decisions. And so within those different groups, there's mandates that they have to follow. And so, but the key element that brings them together is the purpose of trying to work together for the greater good, for the landscape scale conservation. And so with this trip and going to the Arctic Refuge, and also just with speaking with all of you, all of our actions can seem kind of minuscule and small, but know that every action that you take, even shifting our mentality of how we approach meetings, makes us a little change in the system to look at things differently. And so with that, I've slowly began to incorporate movement into all of the meetings, because movement gets us out of our head and more into our body and helps us think a little clearer about the issues that we're discussing. And the issues in the Arctic are very vast, as I imagine many issues in the areas that you're from, especially when we start to think about the whole global Earth as a whole, of how things are changing. And we feel the fires that are happening in the Pacific Northwest. We felt the fires last year with Australia, and we just feel so much. But we tend to push it down, or kind of continue to maybe read the news or feel like we can't do anything. But we are slowly doing things, and by reconnecting with the lands. And even if one thing is I really want to encourage is also not looking into what the place names around your area were traditionally called, but also looking into how your ancestors connected with the land, because we were all Indigenous at one point, and we all relied on the land in a very nomadic way. And I think some of the values are so important in how we approach our work today. Is we could all use a little more time in going slowly before just jumping right into the issues. And so I strongly encourage you guys to think a little bit differently, maybe more curious, and also because with the curiosity, you're able to think more expansively of how we can move forward. So Karlin and I were like wanting to bring more people to the Arctic Refuge and have these difficult discussions with different groups of people. And I think with that energy and that excitement will bring more people in. And yeah, so I think anything else from you, Karlin? Now I'm just rambling.
No, thank you, Danielle, and thank you for joining to talk about our trip today on a Saturday. And I think we want to leave you with a thought from our elder who took us into the refuge, Robert Thompson, who said that he likes to bring people to the refuge because he says once they see this place and how amazing it is and how special it is and how sacred it is, they will want to save it and to protect it. And that's the same with a lot of our nature on the planet. This is the only planet we have, and these are the only spaces that we have. And we're not only protecting them, but Mother Nature is protecting us. And so it's important that we take care of Mother Nature. And in order to want to do that, you first have to get out into Mother Nature and experience her. And you'll be so thankful that you did. And we're thankful for your time today and for letting us join you. Thank you, Siobhan and Elena and everyone who's putting on the Refuge Outdoor Festival. Thank you so much for your time and for tuning in.
Shannon, thank you, everyone. It was really great to be here today.
Thank you.